Thank you, Nina and Ricky. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News on tonight's headlines. In today's top story, an optimistic President Macron arrived at the White House, making him the first European leader to visit Washington since President Trump's re-election. His mission, to seek a consensus on ending the war in Ukraine.
Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort.
And the news starts now. In today's top story, an optimistic President Macron arrived at the White House, making him the first European leader to visit Washington since President Trump's re-election. His mission, to seek a consensus on ending the war in Ukraine and to stabilize the strained transatlantic relationship.
Well, thank you very much. We very much appreciate the attention. Today's a big day in that we had a G7 and President Macron is a very special man in my book. We were together, we did it together, and I think a lot of progress has been made. We've had some very good talks with Russia, we've had some very good talks with others, and we're trying to get the war ended with Russia and Ukraine, and I think we've come a long way in a short period of weeks.
It appeared that the old camaraderie was returning, but differences quickly emerged, especially regarding each side's contributions to Ukraine.
Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort, and it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money, to be clear. We have 230 billion frozen assets in Europe, Russian assets, but this is not as a collateral of a loan, because this is not our belonging. So they are frozen. If at the end of the day, in the negotiation we will have with Russia, they're ready to give it to us, super. It will be a loan at the end of the day, and Russia will have paid for that.
If you believe that, it's okay with me.
Meanwhile, Trump continues to push for Ukraine to hand over half of its key natural resources as compensation for America's support. He added that a deal with Ukraine's President Zelensky is near.
I will be meeting with President Zelensky. In fact, he may come in this week or next week to sign the agreement, and which would be nice. I'd love to meet him. Would meet at the Oval Office. So the agreement's being worked on now. They're very close to a final deal. It'll be a deal with rare earths and various other things, and he would like to come, and I understand it, here to sign it, and that would be great with me.
On the compensation issue, Macron held firm, stressing that Russia should bear the cost.
And it's part of the negotiation at the end of the war, because, this war costed all of us a lot of money. And this is the responsibility of Russia, because the aggressor is Russia.
There is, however, a glimmer of agreement on another front. Both France and the UK are open to deploying European peacekeeping troops in Ukraine following a truce.
I think it's good to have discussion. I think it's useful to have negotiation. I think it's super important to go to the peace. But my strong point was to say, let's try to get something first which can be assessed, checked and verified. And let's be sure that we build sufficient guarantees on the short run. And this is where we are ready to be engaged. As for France, a lot of my European colleagues are ready to be engaged. But we do need this American backup, because this is part of the credibility of the security guarantees. And this is our collective deterrence capacity.
While European leaders are hopeful of returning to the negotiating table, questions remain about whether the U.S. will offer a security guarantee or insist on Ukraine reclaiming its territory. Just last Friday, President Trump criticized President Macron and Prime Minister Keir Starmer for doing nothing to end the war. Yet now he's praising their efforts. Clearly, his stance can change in an instant.
Trump refuses to refer to Russian President Vladimir Putin as a dictator after calling Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator last week. But Macron says it's clear that Russia is the aggressor in the conflict, a topic Trump wavered on last week. Trump expressed a desire for a ceasefire as soon as possible, and he said he was trying to arrange one between Ukraine and Russia.
And I've spoken with both President Putin and President Zelensky, and again, a lot of good things toward peace are happening, moving it, I think, pretty quickly.
Trump says he could go to Moscow to meet Putin once a deal is reached. Macron, on the other hand, urged a more deliberate approach, starting with a truce and then a peace deal that includes security guarantees. Later on Fox News, Macron said a peace deal has to consider the security of both Ukraine and the rest of Europe.
Be careful, because we need something substantial for Ukraine, but for the security of Europe and France. And second, let's work together on the future to preserve security guarantees, meaning to be sure that this peace will be respected by Russia. First, to have a truce. I think it could be done in the weeks to come. During this period of time, we negotiate on security guarantees, land and territories, and it will be the responsibility of the Ukrainian president. Reconstruction.
He adds any peace deal must be assessed, checked, and verified. The two leaders did agree, however, on the deployment of European peacekeeping forces once a peace deal is eventually reached. Trump says he accepts the concept, as does Putin. While Trump is open to a peace deal that would see Ukraine give up some of its territory to Russia, Macron says any deal should include sovereignty for Ukraine. At one point during the news conference, Trump portrayed himself as the great deal maker, boasting about his negotiating skills.
I think Russia, likewise, I've spoken to President Putin, and my people are dealing with him constantly, and his people in particular. And they want to do something. I mean, that's what I do. I do deals. My whole life is deals. That's all I know is deals. And I know when somebody wants to make it and when somebody doesn't.
Throughout the news conference, Macron stuck to the issue of securing lasting peace with security guarantees for Ukraine and Europe. Macron is the first European leader to visit Trump since he regained power a month ago. He calls his discussions with Trump a turning point in the drive for a more unified approach. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer will visit Trump later in the week. Thomas I. Likeness, NET25 World News.
The United Nations Security Council adopted a U.S.-drafted resolution on the third anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine that takes a neutral position on the conflict as U.S. President Donald Trump seeks to broker peace.
This resolution puts us on the path to peace. It is a first step, but a crucial one of which we should all be proud. Now we must use it to build a peaceful future for Ukraine, Russia, and the international community.
And the terms of the peace must send a message that aggression does not pay.
Until now, the 15-member council has been unable to take any action on the conflict in Ukraine because Russia is a veto power. The U.S. resolution received 10 votes in favor, while France, Britain, Denmark, Greece, and Slovenia abstained. Now, on Monday, Ukraine marked 3 years since Russia's full-scale invasion, a grim milestone amid an ongoing conflict. Deputy Prime Minister Ola Stefanishina announced that Ukraine and the U.S. are in the final stages of negotiating a minerals deal, a move many see as key to ending the war. Now, does this mean Ukraine is finally edging closer to peace? And what might such a deal look like? Take a look.
As Russia's war in Ukraine entered its fourth year on Monday, the Kremlin said it welcomed what it called a new U.S. approach to dialogue with Moscow. U.S. President Donald Trump has flipped the switch on Western efforts to isolate Moscow following the war, as he and his officials engage with their Russian counterparts over plans to end it. Ukraine has said it's committed to a diplomatic resolution to the war, but with Kyiv and Europe shut out of those talks, Washington seems inclined to grant Russia a number of concessions that may be hard for Ukraine to swallow. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has told NATO allies it was unrealistic for Ukraine to join the military alliance if it wants to settle with Russia. Moscow has demanded NATO scrap its 2008 promise to one day give Kyiv membership. It has also dismissed the idea of having NATO member forces act as peacekeepers in Ukraine under a ceasefire deal. In November, Reuters reported that Russian President Vladimir Putin was ready to cut a deal with Trump if Kyiv dropped its goal to join NATO and if Moscow didn't have to make major territorial concessions. How much land Russia can keep is a critical issue moving forward. It now controls nearly 1/5 of Ukraine, or an area about the size of the US state of Ohio, mostly in the east and south. Putin in June last year said he wants Ukraine's troops out of 4 Ukrainian regions claimed and mostly controlled by Russia. The US defense chief in February dismissed Ukrainian hopes of restoring its internationally recognized borders.
Chasing this illusionary goal will only prolong the war and cause more suffering.
For any deal to happen, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv needs security guarantees to prevent any future Russian attack. But the Trump administration has made clear it will send no troops. That places the burden on European powers, which are likely to struggle without US backing. Britain and France are firming up ideas with allies for military guarantees for Ukraine, according to Western officials. The two leaders will seek to persuade Trump to provide US assurances after any ceasefire deal.
It's time to take responsibility for our security, our continent. And I'm clear that Britain will take a leading responsibility. We have to be ready to play our role if a force is required in Ukraine once a peace agreement is reached.
Ukraine does have one thing to offer the US, its mineral wealth, including lithium, which is key to making electric vehicle batteries. Zelensky rejected an initial deal to give Washington 50% of Ukraine's critical minerals, saying it offered no security guarantees. But with little leverage on hand, Ukraine is set to sign a minerals deal soon. Reuters also reported that US negotiators had raised the possibility of cutting Ukraine's access to Elon Musk's Starlink satellite internet system, which has played a vital role in Kyiv's military operations. Musk has denied this. On Monday, Zelensky's deputy posted on X saying Ukrainian and US teams are in the final stages of negotiations regarding the minerals agreement, adding that Ukraine hopes to sign the deal in Washington with officials there, quote, to showcase our commitment for decades to come.
Our teams are already working productively with the U.S. on economic agreement, which we hope to sign in Washington. And President Trump, we would really like to hear from you, because all of our people, all our families are very worried. Will there be support from America? Will America be the leader of the free world? And I want to be very honest with you. For our people, for life in general, it's so important that American support, American assistance remains. And really, I believe we can be just as effective in securing real guarantees for peace.
The Trump administration has lifted its freeze on financial assistance for Philippine military modernization. The Department of Foreign Affairs confirmed on Monday. Now, DFA spokesperson Teresita Daza said the Philippine government was informed of the exemption, which includes $336 million to modernize the country's security forces. Daza noted the U.S. and Philippines remain committed to strengthening their defense cooperation. Furthermore, while the Biden administration had pledged $500 million for the modernization of the armed forces and Coast Guard, the Trump administration has authorized $5.3 billion in previously frozen aid. During a meeting in Germany on February 14, Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio reaffirmed the value of the US-Philippine development cooperation. One of Southeast Asia's biggest and longest-running military exercises began today in northeastern Thailand. More than 8,000 troops from 30 countries are taking part in the Cobra Gold exercise, according to an official press release. Now, this year's training includes command and control exercises, humanitarian assistance, field drills, cyber defense, space operations, and counter-drone strategies, reflecting the evolving nature of modern warfare, according to military officials.
A good question, and I think every year what we try to do is bring in take a look at what's going on in the world around us and what type of technologies are being brought to bear. But that is why we are incorporating cyber into this exercise, for example. We're incorporating space, we're incorporating unmanned aerial systems and methods to counter those unmanned aerial systems. And that last one is one that we are seeing is very important in modern warfare. All of them are, but that last one in particular.
The 44th Cobra Gold exercise runs until March 7. The Armed Forces of the Philippines announced Friday night that they recently joined forces with the French Navy's Charles de Gaulle Carrier Strike Group for a maritime cooperative activity. Colonel Cerces Trinidad, head of the AFP's Military Public Affairs, noted that this marks the third week in a row that our forces have teamed up with others in the West Philippine Sea, operating within the Northern Luzon Command's area.
The successive conduct of MCA with other like-minded nations underscores the growing international focus on maritime security in the West Philippine Sea and aims to strengthen interoperability and defense capabilities among ally and partner nations. Through these joint maritime cooperative activities and collaborative efforts, the AP seeks to build a stronger, more resilient defense system that is prepared to address the challenges of the modern security landscape.
For the exercise, the AFP deployed a robust lineup of assets, including the missile frigate BRP Jose Rizal, the offshore patrol vessel BRP Gregorio del Pilar, an AC-90 patrol aircraft, two FA-50 or 50PH light jet fighters, and several search and rescue units from the Philippine Air Force. On the French side, their team featured the powerful aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle, the Aquitaine-class frigate Province, the supply vessel Jacques Chevalier, the Horizon-class air defense destroyer Forbin, and another Aquitaine-class frigate, the Alsace. A U.S. Coast Guard cutter crossing the Tasman Sea as part of a maritime security mission with Australia and New Zealand confirmed that it was aware of Chinese naval ships in the area, but they didn't interact. That is according to its commanding officer.
Yes, we were aware of their presence. That did not affect our operations. No, we follow international norms, regulations for preventing collisions at sea, and we had no encounters, but we would expect the Chinese Navy to do the same. Of course. Yeah, the Coast Guard supports a very peaceful and prosperous Indo-Pacific, and it's very important to demonstrate compliance with international laws and norms, and that's what we try to do every day out here.
Earlier last week, Chinese naval forces conducted live-fire exercises on Friday and Saturday in international waters between Australia and New Zealand, which Australian officials called unprecedented. These drills even forced airlines to reroute 49 commercial flights for safety reasons. A spokesperson for China's foreign ministry explained that the People's Liberation Army Navy was simply conducting exercises and training in distant waters, all while following international safety standards. Since 2024, the U.S. Coast Guard has stepped up operations in the South Pacific, patrolling for illegal fishing by distant fleets, including those from China, at the request of Pacific Island nations.
We've got a very large patch of ocean that we need to protect and provide that stability within the region. We can't do that without the United States.
Taiwan's Coast Guard said they had detained a China-linked cargo ship today on suspicion of Beijing's gray zone warfare against the island after an undersea cable to the Penghu Islands in the sensitive Taiwan Strait was disconnected. The Coast Guard said it dispatched 3 vessels to detain the Chinese-crewed Hongtai 58, registered in the Togolese Republic, which dropped anchor near the sea cable when it was disconnected off Taiwan's southwestern shores. All 8 crew members are Chinese nationals, and they don't rule out the possibility of Chinese activities of gray zone harassment. The Coast Guard said in a statement, adding further investigation is needed to determine if this is sabotage or accident. Taiwan, which China claims as its own territory, has repeatedly complained about gray zone Chinese activities around the island designed to pressure it without direct confrontation, such as balloon overflights and sand dredging. Taipei was particularly alarmed after a Chinese-linked ship was suspected of damaging a cable earlier this year, prompting agencies including the Navy to step up efforts to protect undersea communication cables, which are vital to the island's communications with the rest of the world. Now let's turn our attention to Indonesia, where the economic policies are once again stirring debate. Take a look. After last year's controversial iPhone ban imposed because Apple wasn't boosting local investments, President Subianto has now launched Indonesia's second sovereign wealth fund called the NARA, or Indonesia's Future Power.
Managing Indonesia's wealth and assets with very careful financial discipline and responsible governance. In our first 100 days, my administration secured over $20 billion in savings, funds that were once trapped in inefficiency, corruption, misallocation, that will now be channeled into 20 high-impact national projects, creating real long-term benefits for our people.
This fund will manage around $900 billion in assets, set to invest in key sectors like mineral processing, renewables, and food production to drive national development. President Subianto envisions a golden Indonesia, aiming to boost economic growth from 5% to 8% and transform the country into a developed nation by 2045. But not everyone is cheering. Recently, hundreds of students hit the streets in major cities, protesting against strict budget cuts and other policies, including reductions in free education and social programs. These austerity measures, cutting everything from office lighting and air conditioning after 4 p.m. to slashing the Public Works Ministry's budget by 80%, are designed to save $19 billion. The savings are meant to fund ambitious projects like a free meals program targeting 82 million people daily.
The first demand is to get rid of the President's order on budget efficiency. Second, we refuse a national strategic project that doesn't orient for the people. Third is to evaluate the free meals program. Fourth, we refuse the energy and minerals law. Fifth, we demand free education.
While about 80% of Indonesians still support the president, many worry that these measures could backfire as economic challenges mount. Thousands of foreign nationals freed from online scam operating centers in Myanmar are stuck in limbo on the border with Thailand after a multinational crackdown on the compounds run by criminal gangs. 3 sources told Reuters on Monday. Now, 2 Myanmar armed groups, the Karen National Army or KNA and the Democratic Karen Buddhist Army or DKBA, are currently holding around 7,000 former scam center workers, but are unable to send them to Thailand, according to a Thai security official and 2 aid workers. Now, footage carried by the Thai Public Broadcasting Service showed what it said were dozens of foreign nationals extracted from recent raids on scam centers, gathered at compounds in the Myanmar border town of Miyawadi. Now, in recent weeks, authorities from China, Thailand, and Myanmar have attempted to dismantle scam centers and illegal online operations on the border, part of a network of illegal compounds across Southeast Asia, where hundreds of thousands have been trafficked by gangs, according to the United Nations. Thailand's foreign ministry said that agencies are currently planning for future handovers of those freed, which would proceed based on the readiness of the embassies or the countries of origin. The majority of these workers are Chinese, with about 1,000 from other foreign countries, according to the aid workers, and many of the former scam center workers are being held in dire conditions, and local authorities are concerned about the lack of sanitation and health facilities. And the news continues here on NET25. We'll be right back. Now, billionaire Elon Musk's push to cut government jobs is hitting a snag, but not from his usual political opponents. It's coming from inside President Trump's own team. Musk's recent order for federal employees to justify their work sparked a fierce backlash, with several agency heads, including newly appointed FBI Director Kash Patel, telling their staff to hold off on responding. Now, Musk's efforts to streamline spending have clearly struck a nerve. One official put it this way.
And people need to understand that. It's not just eliminating government workers and saying, oh, let's trim the fat and get rid of people. But what really does that look like for a country, for a nation? So we need to think twice when we start just looking at targets, government employees as targets. We're people that are really saving the lives of people every day. I just don't think that right now we're getting good quality work output because of all the chaos and confusion and the stress that this is causing. Employees, management, everybody. It's just too much.
Not everyone is on board, though. Trump's National Health Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. has instructed his team to follow Musk's directive, calling it legitimate, and Ed Martin, head of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, cheered Musk's efforts. Amid the uproar, Musk downplayed the criticism on X, stating that an email with some bullet points that make any sense at all is acceptable. Yet the resistance points to growing concerns over Musk's unchecked authority. Meanwhile, President Trump doubled down on Musk's role.
I thought it was great because we have people that don't show up to work and nobody even knows that they work for the government. So by asking the question, tell us what you did this week, what he's doing is saying, are you actually working? And then if you don't answer, like you're sort of semi-fired or you're fired, because a lot of people are not answering because they don't even exist. They're trying to, that's how badly various parts of our government were run by, and especially by this last group.
For now, federal workers remain caught in the middle as the battle over government downsizing is just getting started. Apple announced that it plans to invest $500 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years. And that includes building a huge AI server factory in Texas and creating 20,000 R&D jobs, plus spending on local suppliers and Apple TV Plus content. While the company didn't break down how much of this is new spending, the announcement follows reports that CEO Tim Cook met with President Trump. With potential 10% tariffs on its China-assembled products, some see this move as a political gesture. Notably, Apple made a similar pledge in 2018, and Trump even thanked the company on Truth Social, calling it a sign of confidence in his administration. And tonight, we bring you a story that sounds straight out of a spy movie. A Colombian national caught trying to smuggle cocaine by hiding 19 capsules under his toupee as he boarded a flight from Cartagena to Amsterdam. Philip Toledo has more.
Police say the suspect never made it out of the country. They say they captured him last week as he tried to board a flight from Cartagena, Colombia to Amsterdam. According to the commander of the Cartagena Metropolitan Police, Brigadier General Gelver Yesid Peña Araque, authorities made the bust after a profiling procedure. The man went through a scanner and police conducted a body search. They found about 220 grams of cocaine hidden under a hairpiece.
Through profiling, they found an individual who intended to board a flight from Cartagena to Amsterdam. This individual is profiled by one of our experts and subjected to the procedure. There, through the scanner and a body search, the wig was found, which contained more than 220 grams of cocaine that he intended to take to this country, Amsterdam, and with this, criminal profits got hit. The shipment has an approximate price of more than 10,000 euros in European territory.
Un precio aproximado de más de 10.000 euros en territorio europeo.
The suspect has been handed over to the Attorney General's office and charged with trafficking, manufacture, and possession of narcotic substances. Philip Toledo for NET25 World News.
And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you for joining us. Good night.